it. All of Johnny Bobbitt's GoFundMe money is 100% gone. That's the hook.
Yeah, here we come. Hey, here we come. Hey, here we come. Here we come.
So going back to my video of earlier this week called Paved in Good Intentions, and the thumbnail said The Road to Hell. It was the video about Johnny Bobbitt, Kate McClure, Mark D'Amico, and the GoFundMe monies that were raised for the homeless man, Johnny Bobbitt. Before we get into that, I just want to talk about the Nike video that I just put up. My channel is about making the world a better place, period. Life is meant to be shared, and this is something that I mean more than anybody who doesn't know me personally can possibly imagine. I don't like hurting people, period. It's one of the reasons why I had such a problem with commercial litigation and why I ultimately had to get out of it. I don't like hurting people, making people feel bad, even when they deserve it. I don't like doing it. And so I've said as a tenet of my channel that I'm not going to do politics. This is not going to be a channel where we get into divisive politics, left versus the right, Republicans versus Democrats. That said, we do touch on news issues. And every now and again, some of those news issues border on political. Just as an example, when I did the Omarosa body language video, I was accused both of politics and prejudice. It's the nature of the beast. Sometimes there are some subjects that you can't even touch without the accusation of politics. That said, this channel is not going to be limited to squirrel stealing GoPros for fear of treading that fine line between newsworthy items and politics. I think fundamentally part of making the world a better place is the ability to express an opinion in a respectful manner and to respect the diverging opinions and to understand those diverging opinions. And that's what I hope to do in any video that borders on political when dealing with newsworthy items. If I fail in doing that, then I will fail in the mission of this channel. Now, getting back to Johnny Bobbitt, Kate McClure, and Mark D'Amico, and the fact that none of the $400,000 that they raised is left in the bank account. Apparently there was $200,000 left. At least that's what they told the judge and opposing counsel. They had until the last Friday of August to transfer the remaining balance to Johnny Bobbitt's attorney. The deadline was Friday. The money didn't come in Friday, and people were screaming a foul. I happen to know from the practice of law that it does take upwards of 24 to 48 hours for wire funds to appear in the recipient's bank account. So I was giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, but lo and behold, it is now Wednesday. The monies haven't come in. Johnny Bobbitt's attorneys confirmed that the monies are no longer. And again, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, until I heard confirmation from McClure and D'Amico's lawyers, I was thinking that maybe this is just a misunderstanding or a plaintiff's attorney jumping the gun. It's reported in Time magazine that the money is gone. So whoever predicted that on the original video, you're even more cynical than I am. Shame on you. Alright, now this is a sad story through and through. It's sad because it starts off with the best of good deeds. It turns to greed, and now it seems to have turned to, call it financial tragedy, because it's not the end of the world. I suspect that GoFundMe is going to cover any balance that was misappropriated by D'Amico and or McClure. Now, anybody who's taking any form of educated guess, by the looks of it, is going to guess that this has ended the way it has as a result of D'Amico's apparent gambling problem. So you have addiction on both ends of this story, making it the tragedy that it is. Alright, and this is my other problem, is that I have trouble dissociating the human element from these types of stories. This is why I had such a difficulty with commercial litigation. I couldn't dissociate myself from the human dramatic element of this, the people behind the problems, the people behind the drama. You know, they say like a doctor has to dissociate his or herself from the patient in order to treat the patient objectively, methodically, in a calculated manner. A lot of people say the law is the same way, and I, at the end of the day, had trouble ignoring, forgetting, or detaching myself from the fact that there was a human behind all the suffering on both ends. And looking at this situation with Johnny Bobbitt and Mark D'Amico and McClure, by the looks of it, this situation has devolved into what it has as a result of addiction on both sides. Addiction and, in all likelihood, a little bit of the element of human greed that comes into it when someone raises so much money for somebody. I've seen this a lot in estates law, in partnerships, where when one person is doing something for another person, even though they're supposed to be doing it, how you doing? Oh, hey, hey. Where when one person is supposed to be doing something for somebody else without remuneration, and they discover that it's a lot harder and more time consuming than they initially thought it was going to be. And then after a certain point of time of this, they begin to think that they are entitled to remuneration, compensation, some form of payment in order to compensate them for all of their dedication, which there undoubtedly is. It especially happens with liquidators of estates, where they are liquidating the estate of the deceased, and it's taking a lot of time. They have to correspond back and forth with friends, family. They sometimes tend to start thinking that they're entitled to some sort of remuneration, and they take it out of the assets of the estate. These are the human elements in it. You have addiction, you have greed, you have a sense of entitlement or desert, you have a sense of resentment for the amount of work that goes into something for which you're not being compensated, that drives people to do things that they would otherwise otherwise not normally do. Unethical things that they would not normally do. But there is a learning lesson in all of this, both for donors to GoFundMe, and for people who are starting a GoFundMe for the benefit of the third party, and that we'll get into right... Okay, now the problems with GoFundMe generally start from the moment the funds go from the GoFundMe account into the bank account, the personal bank account of the person who is raising the funds for a third party. Now, in the law, when you are raising funds for a third party, what you want to do is put them in a trust account. That is a separate bank account created for the benefit of the beneficiary to the trust. When people start these GoFundMe pages, first of all, they have no idea how much money they're going to raise. Oftentimes, they're totally shocked by the amount of money that they do in fact raise for the cause. And they see money pouring into this GoFundMe account and they don't know what to do with it. So, when the GoFundMe account comes to an end, they generally have not set up a separate bank account, a trust bank account. It takes a bit of work to set up a trust account. You have to go to the bank and open it, and you have to name a beneficiary. The second you start mingling the assets that you're holding in trust for a third party with your own personal assets, you start running into accounting problems because you have to render an account of your management of those funds. You quickly run into the problem of, well, I spent $500 on gambling, but that was my money and not the money that we had raised for Johnny Bobbitt.
What a lot of people don't appreciate until it's too late is the money you have raised for the benefit of the third party is not your money, period. I believe it was the Offspring that said it best when they said you gotta keep them separated. You cannot mingle the assets you have raised or hold for a third party with your own personal assets without incurring your own liability, period. Now, I said, by the way, in the McClure D'Amico case, all that they had to do if they disputed who owned the funds or what was going to happen with the funds because they were afraid of Johnny Bobbitt's drug addiction, all they had to do was deposit it in court and let a judge adjudicate on how that money gets dispersed. Of course, they couldn't do that because they didn't have the money by the accounts of it, and that was the case because they didn't do it properly from the beginning, and as we say in law, what happens always happens, and it's never good. The question you're asking yourself is, how can you prevent people from stealing from you? The answer is you can't. If you could, there'd be no lawyers. And what a world that would be. But there's two things you always have to bear in mind. Don't trust anybody with more than you can allow them to steal from you. And two, protect yourself in as much as possible, understanding that you can never prevent all chicanery. The only thing you can do is be the best person that you can possibly be, assuming that everyone is operating on bad faith, protecting yourself as much as possible, but not deterring yourself from trying to do good things. Easier said than done.
Okay, but healthy dose of cynicism aside, there are a few things that you as a potential donor to a GoFundMe campaign can do. There are things that the initiator of a GoFundMe campaign ought to do, and there are a few things that GoFundMe might want to look into doing in order to make sure that these types of situations don't recur in the future.
Before we get into the solutions as to how you can avoid these types of problems in the future, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Is anybody coming? Hit the notification bell. If you like the content that I put out, for good or for bad, I would greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment, tell me what you think. I'm not only about the yes comments and the go get 'em comments and we love your content comments. Constructive criticism, diverging opinions. Barney, get out of the way. I am not sensitive. I like hearing what other people who disagree with me say to the extent that it's done and said in a respectful manner. Now, what can you do in the future to avoid these types of problems? Some basic things. Do a very preliminary due diligence on the charity or the cause. Google the names, make sure it's legitimate. A lot of the times these fundraisers pop up overnight and you get so emotionally involved, you want to throw money at it to make yourself feel better, to make yourself feel like you're helping something, but you have to do the basic 101 due diligence to make sure it's not a scam. The second thing is ask questions to the organizer. Ask them what they're going to do with the money, ask them how they're going to handle it. Don't be shy. It's a legitimate question, and if they're defensive about it, you can have some flags going off as to whether or not you want to contribute to this particular campaign. If you are organizing the campaign, keep the money in the GoFundMe account until you have a dedicated bank account or a trust account into which you can transfer the funds. It's a relatively simple thing, but it's essential. If you take that money and put it in your own bank account and undertake to get it to the person for whom it was raised, you're running the risk of incurring your own liability, and you have to start breaking down your own bank accounts, doing a basically doing a forensic accounting as to what you did with the monies because it went into your own personal bank account. It's not a good thing to have to do. And if you're GoFundMe, you might consider making a requirement that if you are raising money for a third party, that as a requirement you have to create a separate bank or provide proof that you have the bank account into which the monies are going to be transferred. Bearing in mind, keeping the money in your GoFundMe account is not a problem. If the person for whom the funds are raised complains that they haven't gotten the money but it's still in the GoFundMe account, you won't have litigation. or at the very least, if you do have litigation, it's going to be very easy to say the money is here, it's not going anywhere until we get this debate resolved. If the money goes into your personal bank account, that whole issue gets much more complicated. Undoubtedly, GoFundMe is going to right this wrong. The situation is going to work out, at least on the financial level. The question is going to be whether or not Johnny Bobbitt gets the help he needs in order to be able to turn his life around. Time will tell. The other issue is going to be what's going to happen with D'Amico and McClure. People who donated money. See you soon. People who donated money, in theory, can sue D'Amico and McClure for fraud and misrepresentation as to what was going to be done with their money that they gave to them. Bobbitt can also sue McClure because the money that was raised for him is his money, regardless of whether or not D'Amico and McClure still have it. It's a whole big mess with one focal point at this mess, and it's a terrible end to what was otherwise a happy story. Anyhow, we'll see where it goes from here.